Welcome to another edition of MissTrial. So happy to see you guys again on this Thursday, August 15th. My friends and law partners and ex-government, ex-prosecutor, we're recovering prosecutors, Danya Perry and Kathleen Rice. I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo, also from Legal AF. So good to see you guys this morning. And I'm so happy that we're going to be talking about three topics that are near and dear to our heart: the intersection of law and politics, where we're going to break down all the developments of what is happening and what is going on. We're really lucky to have Kathleen Rice here with us, who's a former not only prosecutor, but member of Congress, the House of Representatives. So Kathleen is going to talk about and lead our conversation today on the upcoming Democratic National Convention, where she's going to actually be in attendance. So that's going to be exciting. You can tell us all the ins and outs and what's going on. What I'm really excited about is, Kathleen, I want to hear and I want to preemptively understand first of all, what is the convention? What happens there? And what mischief are the MAGA alt-right Republican people going to try and create and try to somehow, you just know their playbook, right? They're going to somehow try and challenge Kamala Harris's certification, or who knows what they're going to do. So I can't wait to hear from you exactly what's going to happen. And, you can predict it, right? Their playbook is absolutely predictable. They do the same thing over and over again. And I want to hear from you because we all have to understand, we all have to educate ourselves so we can prevent it from happening and prevent the misinformation campaign that will inevitably come with whatever losing legal challenges that they will also bring, because that's how it works in MAGA land. And Danya is going to continue, speaking of MAGA policy, is going to continue with educating us on the MAGA platform that Trump is running on, Project 2025, and the difficulties there. And of course, we will also talk about, and I'll lead us on talking about all things involving defendant Donald Trump and his legal cases. It's the middle of August. Judges typically go on vacation. It's usually very slow legally, yet somehow we have so many things going on in his legal cases that we're going to talk about all of them. Things are happening in all of the cases, including the Manhattan DA case, including the Mar-a-Lago case, including the Washington, D.C. case. I will say in Georgia, that's on hold for now, but other than that, there's a lot to talk about, so much so that it's hard sometimes to pick three topics. And if we have time at the end, we're also going to answer questions, because thank you everyone for sending questions like we asked in the comments. So we're going to take a couple of questions, and here we are, another day, another recording of MissTrial. How you guys doing today?
Great to be with you guys.
I miss you guys. Haven't seen you in person. And
I know.
It's nice to see you on video.
It's true. We actually haven't seen each other in person. You're right. We have to work on that. Even though we all work for the same law firm, we're so busy running around all over the place that none of us
celebrate your birthday.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Yes. Thank you. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. So Kathleen, you're going to the convention next week. Tell us about it. Tell us everything. What happens?
I wish that I could pack the two of you in my suitcase with me, because this is one of the biggest, I want to say it's a combination of a circus, a spectacle, and a lot of downtime. So I have actually been in person at one prior convention before. And that was, so I first ran for Congress in 2014. So I got sworn in January of 2015. And in the summer of 2016, we had our convention in Philadelphia. And that is where Hillary Clinton officially became the nominee. And you can just imagine what it's like. I mean, I don't know, 100,000 people descend on a city. In this year, I'm leaving on Monday, so it's going to be all next week. The Democrats are doing theirs in Chicago. And I think they lost out. New York lost out to Chicago, and I forget the other city. But, they have to kind of prove to the DNC or the RNC that they can handle not just a big enough arena to fit all of these people, but easy access. It should obviously be in a major city. But certainly this year, there's going to be, there's always security concerns, but this year they're even more heightened, given what happened 2 days before the Republican National Committee convention, which is the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. So I think that's going to heighten the security concerns. But the DNC is going to hold their convention from August 19th to the 22nd, which begins this Monday. The last time, just a note, a historical note, the last time the DNC was in Chicago was in 1996. And before that, I want to say that 1968, which was actually I guess the last time there was a contested convention, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So let me just give you the run of show. So far, what has been released is Monday, we're going to hear from the president, Joe Biden, and we were also going to hear from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Tuesday, we're going to hear from former President Barack Obama. Wednesday, we'll have the vice presidential nominee, Governor Tim Walz, and former President Bill Clinton. And Thursday, the peak of the whole convention is going to be Vice President Kamala Harris, who during next week will become the official nominee for the Democratic Party for president. So just to give a little pre-convention preparations, they had delegate selections, as we talked about before. They're chosen through primaries, caucuses, or state party conventions. And they basically, what delegates do is they pledge to support specific candidates based on the outcome of either primaries or caucuses. So what else happens next week at conventions is actually it's prior to it begins, but they also do some last minute details of when party members draft a party platform that is meant to outline the party's policies and the priorities. And that document is going to be debated and finalized at the convention. Republicans did the same thing. So what you're going to see at the convention, opening ceremonies. There are going to be, speeches by key party figures and dignitaries. We will go through the nomination process where delegates are actually going to cast their votes. They do it through a roll call. I know you guys have seen this where they all hold the name. They have a big sign that says their state, and one person from the delegation gets to say, these are where we place our votes. Then you're going to have some acceptance speeches, obviously, from the vice president and the president, the adoption of the platform, and then you'll have the closing ceremonies. So I just want to talk briefly about the last contested convention, which was in 1968. So remember, in 68, you had Lyndon Johnson as president, and you remember this was like the height of the opposition to the Vietnam War. After everything good that LBJ had done in terms of like civil rights and all of those things and voting rights, he was becoming increasingly more defined by the quagmire that Vietnam became. So there was the Minnesota Senator Eugene McCarthy said he was going to challenge him. And at some point, Johnson kind of saw the writing on the wall and said, I'm not going to run again, just like Joe Biden did here. But then you had a number of people getting in. Bobby Kennedy began to run. Johnson's out. RFK is in. Then Humphrey, who is the vice president under LBJ, decides he's going to run. We all know what happened to Bobby Kennedy, awful after he won the California primary. He was assassinated in California. And ultimately, Humphrey gets the nomination at the convention where, with a little bit of, noise, the party basically banded together and got behind Humphrey. So that's just a little historical stuff there. So you'll see this all. I'm going to go and, just kind of document all of the things that are happening. Going to run into old friends, and there are lots of events that are being held.
Like the Oscars, where there's like little parties.
Yeah, it is. It's very much like that. It is, Danya. So, Hakeem Jeffries, who is...
That's a good one. That's like Vanity Fair.
Yeah. Yeah, people are looking to get to the best tickets, to the best events. I know that, the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, I believe, is going to be there. Hakeem Jeffries, who I hope is going to be the next Speaker of the House if the Democrats take control of the House, he'll be there as well. But
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is this like a legal thing, or is this like a formality? Like, what is a convention? What's the purpose of it? Where is it established? And I'm asking this because this is where I think the sensitivities will be. These are the pressure points that the Republicans will try and inflict on the Democrats. So is this ceremonial? Is this official? Like, who are these delegates?
So it's a little bit of both. Most of it is the pomp and circumstance of the ceremony of actually putting someone's name, not just putting their name in nomination, but actually having the delegates who is the legal. This is how it was set up. I mean, it used to be like the party leaders who would choose who the candidates were going to be. And there was an enormous backlash against that kind of, smoke-filled room deciding who the national candidates were going to be. So then they came up with the delegate system. And those are people who are chosen by party leaders to be delegates. And they are basically committed to whatever the outcome is of a particular primary, or in like Iowa's case, caucuses. And then they are required to, once all the primaries and caucuses are over, the actual formality of it all. And the Republicans do the same thing. It's the same party. I mean, as the Democratic Party, they do it the same way. They then go to their convention. Part of it is to kind of make this big show and get a little bump, maybe in the polls. It usually, kind of ushers you into maybe like a week of honeymoon period, kind of like what Kamala Harris is going through right now. But formally, there is a requirement that the party nominate someone to become their candidate. And the reason why the timing of this matters is one of the legal issues that may or may not actually be a legal issue, but the Republicans are going to try to make it an issue. They are going to say, the premise of the Republican argument is that Biden cannot be removed from the ballot because he's already on the ballot for president. And this was, remember that
how can he be on the ballot if they haven't chosen their nominee?
So this is why this really isn't a legal issue. Okay. They are using words like the Democrats did a coup to get rid of the president. First of all, he's still president and he will be until January 20th of 2025, no matter what. But he never became the nominee because the formal process of him becoming the nominee happens at the convention. So when it comes to which candidates are listed on the general election ballot for president, each state sets their own rules. So typically, the rules provide that after each recognized political party has its convention, or has otherwise gone through its process of choosing a nominee, the party must transmit that information to each of the states by a certain date so that ballots and other election materials can be prepared. So Joe Biden was only the presumptive nominee. He was not the official nominee. Nobody is until there is an actual vote. So Biden didn't need to be replaced because he was never the official candidate. Now, to the extent that there is even the hint of a legal issue, it's not going to be over whether it's Biden or someone else who is the Democrats' nominee, but about the timing of choosing the official nominee. So the key is that the nomination happens in time to get as I said, the candidate on the ballot in each state. The one state that has kind of been front and center in this whole issue is Ohio, because they originally had a ballot deadline that was before the convention, the Democratic convention. What Ohio did was they were afraid that they were going to look like they were trying to cut out a major party candidate. So they changed their legislature changed the law to a later deadline to accommodate the Democratic convention and the late nature of it being mid-August. Now, there's a hyper-technical argument that Ohio could still contend that a nomination coming from Democrats after their convention would be too late. You'll remember that this was the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why Democrats were going to do the early virtual roll call originally when it was going to be Biden, because this problem presented itself before Biden dropped out. But they wanted it still existed after Biden dropped out, and Kamala Harris locked up all of the delegates to be the nominee to be formally named at the convention. Now, any litigation to keep Biden off the Ohio ballot would be extremely unlikely to succeed, because Ohio has committed to the later date, which I believe is September 1st.
To keep Harris off the ballot.
Yes. I'm sorry, Harris. That's right. And so they've already transmitted that later date to local election officials. There's still plenty of time to print out the ballots with the appropriate nominees and candidates' names on it.
Yeah, it just seems weird that any state would have it. I mean, when the convention is, right? So you would think that the state would have, timing wise, would always be after the convention. I just want to remind everyone, though, the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 is referred to as the Elections Clause. And it essentially says that state legislatures will establish the times, places, and manner of holding elections. And this is how why the states all do it differently, and why the states all have different deadlines, et cetera, because the Constitution expressly says that that's how it's supposed to work, that each state. So, but you would think, given that fact, that they would know that, okay, we can't do it until after the election.
Well, so this is where, look, as you just said,
the convention, sorry.
As you just said, Karen, and so when people say Republicans are going to go to court, well, good luck, because as you just said, it's well within each state's constitutional authority to set election deadlines, how you qualify to get on a ballot, and all of those kind of picayune issues that surround elections. Now, that doesn't stop a state from maybe trying to do something of a partisan nature to kind of screw around with the other party. But I think that the state kind of recognized how bad it would look for them to kind of mid-game move the deadline up and potentially leave it so that someone could not qualify and ballots would be printed without a Democratic nominee on it. But courts have generally held that states can't make it too hard for serious candidates to get a place on the ballot. That's what they have telegraphed. They said, look, you can make up the rules, but you can't make it so difficult for a serious candidate, which Kamala Harris is, to get on the ballot. And that rule, obviously it's going to apply here because Kamala Harris is a serious candidate. Now, there are a handful.
Sorry, I recall the uproar when a couple states, Colorado and Maine, were, had decided in the court system that because Trump was an insurrectionist, he was not eligible to be on the ballot. And of course, the Supreme Court reversed that. It was trial in Colorado, and they reversed that. And I think a lot of people, Democrats included, kind of agreed with that ruling that you've got a serious candidate, put him on the ballot, and let the voters decide. And so
I'm so glad you brought that up. So glad you brought that up.
What I'm really concerned about, and maybe we can pivot to this, is what's going to happen on Election Day. There are now election deniers installed in county, boards of election and certifications. And that's, and there's been a lot of talk about how Trump is making a play for Georgia in particular. At a rally recently, he called out, he gave a shout out to the 3 MAGA representatives on the board of election there. And there's a lot of speculation about all the mischief, that they might wreak on Election Day and beyond, and refusing to certify. I think that's what stops my blood cold. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, well, it's horrific.
No, Danya, you make such a good point, because I'm afraid that, Republicans will say that the mistake that they made in 2020 was that they hadn't prepared state by state, or at least in the battleground states where the election results are most contested. They didn't prepare the last time, but to your point, they have prepared since 2020 to install party sycophants and MAGA devotees into these positions. And that is the scary reality. Hey, look, I mean, someone asked, I think, if Kamala Harris loses the race, is she going to, as the vice president is required to, certify the election results?
Can you imagine if she tried to do that? Can you imagine the uproar if she tried to do that?
On the other side, yeah, that would be an irony. Rolling Stone identified in the swing states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, at least 70 pro-Trump election conspiracists who are currently election officials who have questioned the validity of elections or delayed or refused to certify results. 20 of them have refused or delayed certification in recent past elections. So, to your point, Kathleen, they're prepared. They're locked and loaded for the next one. And if there's a close vote, if Kamala's ahead, I mean, I think we have reason to be concerned. But the good news is that Democrats also are ready to go, and there is an army of incredibly capable election lawyers. They're the Mark Eliases of the world. Who Mark Elias is one of is the foremost election lawyer in the country, and he brought any number and defended any number of cases in the last go round. And he now has his own firm, and there's just we're ready to go too. So, but it's just going to be, it's going to be ugly it's going to be
so ugly. It's going to be so ugly because if you look, I think that the Republican complaints about, Kamala replacing Joe Biden as the nominee, it serves really two purposes. I would say that prior to, July 21st, it was really just bluster to try to deter Democrats from replacing Biden out of fear. As much as they complained about Biden and said he was too old, Republicans did, they wanted him to be the candidate. They didn't want him to be replaced.
Some of their own success.
Yes. Yeah. And second, it's a chance to kind of cast aspersions on the legitimacy of the election. They're doing it now by saying there was a coup, and Democrats took, the chutzpah of them using the word coup, in light of what happened on January 6th is just, it's too rich to even talk about. But they're setting up these arguments, to your point, Danya, and they're going to have a full-throated, arsenal of legal complaints that they are going to have, that they're going to take into court. Remember in 2020, it was the pressure campaign on elected officials that Trump did. It was the fake elector scheme. It was trying to get Mike Pence to go beyond what his role was on January 6th in certifying the election. So they're going to have an even more broad arsenal of attacks. And this is going to be one of them, that there was this ridiculousness of there being a coup when Joe Biden was never the named nominee to begin with.
Yeah, as Karen said in the beginning, there's a playbook, and we saw it the last time. For months before the election, Trump was telegraphing that he said explicitly that he was not necessarily going to go along with it. And it was, there was in the last go around, there was a lot of talk about mail-in ballots being fraudulent. Now we see what the play is this go around, and it is going to be something around that. And so we just need a landslide, I guess.
Yes,
we need a
mandate.
mandate.
Speaking of that, let's just one last thing I just want to talk about is, the platform that is going to be put out there. We're going to see next week what the Democratic platform is going to be, but you can imagine what it's going to be. It's going to women's right to choose, and healthcare. It's just going to be, we'll see what it's going to be, but we do know what the Republicans created on their platform. They talked about economic recovery. We're going to cut inflation, border security, mass deportations, national defense. We're going to beef up our military. And of course, they were talking about cultural issues, social conservatism was highlighted. But one thing I want to point out that I think is so interesting is, for the first time in 40 years, the Republican platform, the national Republican platform, did not contain a national ban on abortion. And I think that is very telling, because as much as they talk about, yes, we sent it back to the states, that's where everyone wanted it. Even though when Trump says, Republicans, independents, and Democrats all wanted it to go back to the states, there's no evidence that anyone wanted that other than the ultra conservative wing of the Republican Party. But for the first time in 40 years, the Republican platform did not contain a national ban on abortion, because they know how unpopular it is. Again, 63% of Americans think abortion should be legal. So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll be here a week from now, and I'll be able to tell you with more specificity exactly what the Democratic platform is going to be. But, we can imagine from, what it's going to be. Maybe there'll be a slight difference because it's not Joe Biden running, it's Kamala Harris, and she's going to want to, I'm sure, stake something out that can be uniquely hers as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the platform, the policy platform that they're going to come out with, the one the Republicans came out with, it's not a full comprehensive, this is what we believe on everything. It's this is what we're going to focus on to win the election. The full comprehensive, what do we believe? That's Project 2025.
Exactly.
That is the thing that tells them exactly what they believe, and the people that they're going to install all come from Project 2025. As you said, Danya, earlier, and Kathleen, the Republicans, when Donald Trump won, they weren't prepared. Nobody thought that he was going to win. And so they were not prepared with who they put in to execute the Republican vision. And Project 2025 was created in order to not be caught flat-footed, and to instead write the playbook with the policies and the people that they're going to put in place to execute at each and every one of these things. And it's very clear, because it mentions it in Project 2025, that it's all about the abortion bans, and not allowing abortion full stop. There's no kind of leave it up to the states. So I think this is a great segue to pivot into our next topic, which is a little more on Project 2025, which is what we're going to do every week. We're going to talk a little bit about it, because we have to get it out there, because the Republicans, as you pointed out, Kathleen, they took it out. They took their policy on abortion out of their platform so that they don't highlight it, because they know it's they might cost them the election among women in particular. But it's up to us and incumbent upon us to bring these to the forefront and highlight all these issues, because just because they're pretending to hide them, they're hiding in plain sight. It's out there, it's written, it's their manifesto. And until I'm not going to stop talking about it until I'm blue in the face, because it's so important for people to understand who you're voting for, right? Don't just listen to their spoken words at the time, especially with MAGA. They lie. They outright lie. You have to look at what they're going to do and what they said they're going to do. And Project 2025 is that. Before we launch into that, though, I want to just thank our pro-democracy sponsors and go for a very short ad break. Dry skin, deeper wrinkles, crepiness. These are just a few things that are visible signs of aging, something that today's sponsor, OneSkin, knows all about. Now, I, unfortunately, because I'm on television, I now notice these things about myself. I used to not really think about it or care, but now that I have a podcast, I notice my skin, and I notice that I'm aging. I just turned 58 years old, and I love this sponsor, OneSkin. This is a cream that I put on my face every single day, and people have started noticing that I actually am reversing the signs of aging on my skin. So I really love this sponsor. They're amazing. This is something that goes into skin longevity and into the cellular aspect of trying to repair what your skin naturally does as we age. There's something called senescent cells that you start accumulating as you age. Some people call them zombie cells, and they stop producing collagen and hyaluronic acid like they used to. So they start secreting an inflammatory substance that makes other cells not work as well as they could. And OneSkin is targets these zombie cells. It was founded by an all-woman team of scientists. MissTrial loves that since we're all women. And OneSkin is the first and only skin longevity company to target cellular senescence, a key hallmark of aging, with their proprietary OS1 peptide. It's scientifically proven to decrease lines and wrinkles, boost hydration, and help with the thinning skin that often comes with age. Don't just take my word for it. They've got over 5,000 five-star reviews, and they have a whole line of full body products. You can also ask my mother, who noticed, actually. She said, "What are you doing to your skin?" And if my mother notices and she says it, it must be true. So rather than treat the symptoms, treat the root cause of aging, and try this cutting edge OneSkin. I really love it. I use it every day, and I am beyond thrilled that they are sponsoring our podcast, MissTrial, that they are pro-democracy sponsors, and you can keep your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Get started with 15% off using code MissTrial. That's MISSTRIAL at oneskin.co. That's 15% off with code MISSTRIAL at oneskin.co, not com.co. Thank you so much, OneSkin, for sponsoring this podcast. Let's face it, after a night having too many drinks, I don't bounce back the way I used to, for sure. So I either have to make a choice. I can either have fun with my friends or have a good next day. That is until I found Z-Biotics. This is a probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. I don't want to look puffy. I'm on TV all the time, or I'm doing a podcast. So here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And this byproduct is not dehydration. That's not the only thing that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. And so this is a proactive solution that wards off feeling miserable the next day instead of a reactive approach like drinking electrolytes or eating greasy food, also something I don't like to do anymore. So every time I have Z-Biotics before I drink, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on being able to appear on television without worry. So admittedly, I was a little skeptical at first, but then when I was hanging out with a friend and having a couple glasses of wine, I gave it a shot. But now that I've tried it a few times, I know it works. And so I absolutely love Z-Biotics. And it's something that I will use if I'm going out to dinner and having a couple glasses of wine. So it shouldn't depend on whether you're on vacation, going to a wedding, birthday party, reunion, dinner, like me, anything. Get the most out of your evenings out and join the movement of people like me who are choosing Z-Biotics for smoother mornings and unstoppable success. So enhance your mornings with Z-Biotics. Go to zbiotics.com/MissTrial to get 15% off your first order when you use MissTrial at checkout. That's with 2 S's, by the way, MISS trial, no space. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. If you're not satisfied for any reason, they'll just refund your money, no questions asked. So remember to head to zbiotics.com/MISSTRIAL and use the code MissTrial at checkout for 15% off. Thank you so much, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode of MissTrial. All right, we're back. Love these sponsors. It's great. I'm so excited that we already have sponsors, given how new we are, and our viewership is just unbelievable. And we love all the questions people are sending in. Can't wait to answer some of them. So just the engagement, the participation, the community. And, a lot of people have been saying in the comments how happy they are to get a woman's point of view in a lot of this. This is, unfortunately, the world we live in, the legal world we live in especially, is dominated a lot by male voices. So it's fun to have this perspective on this show. So we're back, and Danya, let's tell us what the Republicans are actually going to do as opposed to what they say they're going to do should Donald Trump be elected president.
Yeah, it was a great segue from the last segment. Kathleen spoke a little bit last week about what the Project 2025's plans were with respect to abortion. And I tucked back into that again just as I was looking at other items on the policy agendas. And it is mind-boggling. And so it is worth a read. As we said, we've been saying, you don't have to take our word for it, although it's a hard read, not just because it's 922 pages, but just because it is just flabbergasting. I've read and listened to podcasts where there are discussions about focus groups and trying to ask regular voters or different constituents of voting populations what they think about it. And the gating issue was they could not believe that these were real policy proposals from the MAGA side. They just couldn't get over that hurdle that there's no way they actually want to do this stuff, right? But they do say it there in their 900 plus page manifesto. And as much as Trump is trying to distance himself from it, it's impossible for a lot of reasons. First of all, at a dinner sponsored by the Heritage Foundation, which was the genius, if you want to call it that, behind the manifesto, in April of 2022, he said, this is a quote, "This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America." So he said it out loud. And by the way, there's no other plan, right? It's not like there's competing plans out there. These are, hundreds of people that he has relationships with and crossover with. And there's also no other database of personnel. They are the ones who are putting together the what they call an army to populate the next administration. So this is it. But to get into it, what I want to talk a little bit about today was the quote unquote, again, scare quotes, policy with respect to Department of Education and policies for K through 12 and then for higher education. Just to remind people, I think everyone knows by now, but this conservative policy agenda has been developed by a number of conservative groups, as I said, spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation. It is, there were, as I said, a tremendous amount of crossover with former Trump administration officials, people who we know will be part of any second Trump administration. And they're remarkably transparent about what they want to do. And what it is, I mean, the gloss over all of this is it's conservatism, of course, but it's more than that. It's white Christian nationalism, more than kind of the traditional political conservatism. It's about kind of ethno-traditionalism and protecting the freedom of just a small group, a narrowly defined us, and then everyone else is a them. They're other. And it is, for example, the chapter on education, which I'm going to unpack a little bit, chapter 11, it's 44 pages. Again, read it yourself if you don't believe what we're saying today, because it's so unbelievable. But it's larded with all kinds of policy proposals that kind of fit this traditional conservative, white Christian conservative agenda. For example, what it focuses on overwhelmingly is kind of gender identity, and as always, transgender students are singled out for particular derision and being made outcasts. So this Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, the Trump folks, what they really want to do is to maintain rights for a certain type of student and their parents who support a particular type of values. And they want to take away, just truly eliminate protections for others. So for racially for minorities, for LGBTQ plus, and of course, as always, for transgender children. So, to get into it a little bit, what this agenda proposes is truly, it's not a whittling down. It's an elimination of the Department of Education. That is completely dismantled. It's really largely gone. The only thing it will be good for or used for is kind of amalgamating statistics. But it's not. It really loses its power to do what it traditionally has done, and what millions and millions of school children around the country need it to do, which is develop agendas and norms and regulations, and to actually make sure that there is a uniform policy and protocols around the country that benefit everybody and not just pockets of the population. And in line with that, it would get rid of the Head Start program for kids, low-income children, as well as Title I programming that provides federal funding to school districts that also serve low-income children. And what is truly remarkable about this is that a lot of the states and the districts that are best served or need these kinds of programs the most are in red states. But that does not matter. It will eliminate it across the board. And as I said, it would get rid of protections for LGBTQ plus and particularly for trans students. It would eliminate enforcement of civil rights laws, or at least greatly diminish it. And students with disabilities under the IDEA Act, the Education for Students with Disabilities, it would get rid of that or largely diminish it. And it would get rid of the federal student loan portfolio and privatize that. So, I mean, a lot of this, I want to be clear, a lot of this would require legislation, so it would require approval from Congress. And so a lot of this is just, it's setting forth its wish list, right? It's some of them kind of moonshots because it would require both houses of Congress. But a lot of the proposals could be enacted just, by the president, including rolling back civil rights protections and rolling back Title IX protections, right? So there's Title IX protection, which aims to get rid of sex-based discrimination, Title VI to get rid of race-based discrimination. It would get rid of, by executive order, could get rid of federal civil rights enforcement. And so there's really
they could withhold funding, right, for many of the programs that they provide to low-income states in particular as well, right?
Absolutely. And this is how we know, it's one way, I'm sorry there are so many, that we know that Trump is on board with this, because he's been talking about that forever, right? They have threatened to take away funding for any state that does not follow, the protocols, which just hurts, the kids in that state, innocent children in that state, who are as innocent. And
it's so heartbreaking. The kids are the ones who suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awful. And, the state that they're born in, obviously, not their choice, not their fault, but they would lose funding. And that's just too bad, so sad from Trump and his acolytes. And,
not to get personal, but I guess to get personal, I don't know if I've ever even spoken about this, but publicly, but one of my children has a disability, and her success is largely due to the education and supports that she has received since she was 1.5 years old. And a lot of it since age 3 came from education funding. I can't imagine what it would, if we didn't have that, certainly the amount of money that the government put in for her so that she can be the person she is today, I can't imagine what families would do without that being provided by the education system. I mean, put my own situation aside, just because I know what it takes. I know how hard it is. I know how many resources and some, that you have to provide for somebody who needs that level of support. I think about all the low income people, the immigrants, the, people who just don't have the resources that I have, frankly, or that others like me have. It's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking for those kids. And also, P.S. it will be more expensive in the long run, because you're going to have to then, the whole point is to help them gain independence so they can live a successful life on their own and not be dependent on government funding, or not end up in the criminal justice system or mental health. What are all the places, all the institutions that people who don't get help and support end up in? It becomes more expensive. If you just want to look at it coldly, from a budgetary standpoint, it gets more expensive because you're supporting them for the rest of their lives. Whereas if you make this investment when they're younger, it absolutely, it's a big investment in the short run, but in the long run, it's cost effective, because then these individuals can live a successful, independent, and happy life. Not to mention that it's more humane in order to do so. So sorry to pivot to that, but I hear this, and it strikes a chord in me that is so personal and so upsetting. When I think about it, I just can't believe it.
It's so important to hear, Karen, because it's, so cutting or getting rid of, Title I and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that has been the primary way that, school children who live in districts where there, is not, the revenue that can be collected from local property taxes is not what you would want it to be. So they have a baseline, they have a level of resources and funding that they otherwise wouldn't. And you hear, stories like yours. And I mean, you look at J.D. Vance, right, who talked in his book, which I have not read and will never buy, but I've read about it. That he himself was dependent, his family was dependent on government assistance when he was a kid, and now they just want to cut it. So I think hearing these kinds of stories, very personal stories, same as you hear personal stories, on women in red states which have cut access to abortion, the horrific stories where they're, bleeding out from an ectopic pregnancy or whatever it is. These kinds of policies are not popular, as Kathleen said, right? They're not popular. That you're picking fights with low income families and kids with special needs. How once
but also Danya, doing it under the umbrella of we are all about family values.
Correct. Certain families. That's
defining
exactly
a family.
right.
Yes.
Not all families. It's one mother was born female,
right.
Father born a male. They marry and they have children. The mother, and this, you almost kind of have to read the entirety of Project 2025 for this to really coalesce. But what comes together in the body of that plan is just how traditional the values are. The mother stays at home and takes care of those kids. The father is the breadwinner.
That's what it says in there.
I mean, again, you have to, put it together. But yes, fathers should be working.
Yes.
And taking
and
care
mothers should be at home. Having children.
All the time also, right? I mean, J.D. Vance is not shy.
His wife is like a successful lawyer.
But, he talks about, grandparents, taking care of children. And that's one of the great things about being married to an Indian woman, because that's kind of the idea. And so even postmenopausal women are still expected to have children.
Yes.
It is stunning. And so that's, as I said in the beginning, that's kind of the overlay over the entirety of this manifesto, this agenda, is this white male, Christian, ethno-traditional view of the world. And anyone who's not in that rubric is out. And it's about transferring power back, right? This is revanchist, like transfer of power back to those people who traditionally have had it, who feel it's slipping out of their grasp and they want it back. And this is the mechanism. This is the way to get it back. It's a nightmare. It really is. One of you said last week, it's Gilead. It's the Handmaid's Tale. That you can see JD Vance, actually, he's one of the commanders, and this is his viewpoint, and it truly, is just heart stopping. It's heartbreaking in the way you talked about, Karen, and it's just heart stopping because this is, those of us, we're, DEI, like we got to where we are because, we're women. And they want to stop that. And maybe, I don't think I'm being dramatic here. I think that.
Well, Donna, to your point, I don't think you are at all. And what you're doing is, it's almost like believe what you're seeing, right? Believe what you're reading. You don't have to go, and you can just look at this document. And by the way, there has been no serious disavowal of Project 2025 by Trump or Vance or anyone else in the Republican Party. They are not making any bones about it. This is their manifesto. And so people cannot say that they went into this election not understanding their platform, because you can read it yourself. You don't have to go into any of these, chat rooms or anything else to kind of spin what this means. As you were saying it, Danya, that is as it reads. That is what it is.
Yeah. Well, it's a terror. That's all. And, I think, as I said, like, people don't believe it, when they first hear about it. So that's why, we're going to keep bringing it back. And, we'll pull out more quotes, because I'm trying to distill 922 pages, but let's do that next week. And
definitely.
That's what I love. Yeah, that's what I love about MissTrial is the fact that, rather than making anybody read the 922 pages, we'll do it for them. That's how I felt when I was listening to the Trump Elon Musk Spaces thing the other night. I was literally driving back from dropping off this daughter from a new program that she's in, and we're driving back, and it's a long car ride, and I just go on my little Twitter thing or X, and I'm like, what's this? I had no idea it was even happening. Trump and Elon Musk, and I press on it and I start to listen to it, and at first I thought, this is like a Saturday Night Live spoof. This can't be real, because Donald Trump had this weird lisp, and he just sounded kind of incoherent. It was almost like he's a character of himself. He was just rambling, and then I realized it was real, and it wasn't really an interview. I couldn't tell what it was, or a conversation, because they just talked to themselves, each of them, and talked at each other. It was one of the more bizarre experiences. Anyway, I say this because I feel like I did that on behalf of others, so others didn't have to suffer through. At the end, I was like, I wish I had the last 2 hours of my life back. It was horrific. It was, if I wasn't in a long car ride with nothing else to do, I would never have invested that much time listening to it, because it was terrible, terrible, terrible. Anyway, really quick though, in addition to reading from it, I want to put up a visual of Sydney loaded Sydney, our producer, loaded a picture here. Look what came up. This is what happens if you abolish the Department of Education. Stop Project 2025. My ancestors built this kind. It's just so bizarre, right? Like look at this. Anyway, so I wanted to add a little levity before we pivot to our next topic, which is what's going on with the court cases and Donald Trump's court cases. So let's start with the Manhattan DA case, because a lot's happening there. As just to remind everyone where we are, Donald Trump was convicted of 34 counts of a felony falsification of business records, and he was supposed to be sentenced already, but it was postponed due to the July 1st presidential immunity decision that came down from the United States Supreme Court, creating a brand new law, essentially, and a new privilege, saying that presidents have a unique position and cannot be criminally prosecuted for doing for committing crimes. But as long as they were doing their job and it was within their core job description, they cannot be prosecuted for that. So that was the decision, but it also created this other category that went even further than oral arguments, judges, anyone thought they were going to go, which is they created this new privilege, or this new section of or classification of immunity, where you can't even use evidence if the evidence comes from things that were within his official core duties and job description. That can't be used to prove crimes that were personal, right? So they created this sort of new standard in this new category that caused the Manhattan DA case to be postponed, not because they think that he was immune. None of this was, having sex with a porn star and then paying her off in order to steal an election, falsifying business records. Nobody thinks that was presidential, right? That wasn't within his job description. However, there was certain pieces of evidence that were utilized at the trial that may fall into that category. And that's what the Judge Juan Merchan in New York State Supreme Court, that's what we call our trial level court in New York. That's what he has to determine. And so he postponed it until September 18th. In the meantime, he set a motion schedule for the parties, if they want to submit any post-verdict motions, which both sides did, and then any sentencing briefs. Well, 45 days or something like that after the deadline to submit any of these post-verdict motions, Donald Trump's lawyers file another motion. They don't ask for permission to do it. They don't say, gee, we know the deadline passed. Can we please do it? They just file it. And what did they file? They filed for the third time a motion to recuse Judge Merchan, which is, ridiculous, because they've made that motion twice already, at least, if not, I know they've made it twice in writing, but they've orally made that motion dozens of times, seeking that he recuse himself. They say there's been a change in circumstance, but it's kind of ridiculous because, again, they've already made this motion multiple times and it's already been ruled on multiple times. And the basis for it in the past was that Judge Merchan's adult daughter works for a consulting firm that works for Democratic political candidates. That's number one. And also that he donated, I think, $10 or something, or $15 to the Democratic PAC that was supporting Hillary Clinton when she was running against Donald Trump. And those are the reasons. And the way it works in a recusal motion is it's up to the individual judge to determine whether or not they feel they should be recused. That's just the way it is. And Judge Merchan, in addition to knowing in his heart that he could be fair and impartial despite those two things, he asked for an advisory opinion from the oversight body that provides advice to judges in New York. And they said, they responded and said there was no reason to recuse himself based on that motion and that conduct. And so he wrote a decision and said, I don't feel I need to be recused, and I'm fair and impartial. And frankly, any appellate court that's going to review the record of that trial will see how fair and impartial he is. That's Judge Merchan. He calls balls and strikes. There's nothing about him that's has an agenda, and that's from experience. I've been before him many times, but also that's what happened during the trial. And Danya, you were at the trial. because you represent Michael Cohen, and you saw a lot of it, and I'm sure you will agree with me that is how he conducted himself. Well, of course, what do they do what do they do this week? They have to file another motion saying, once again, we want you to recuse yourself. It's just so stupid. Why? Why are you doing this? Why are you pissing off the judge who has to sentence you, number one? Because that's all you're doing. You've already preserved the issue for appeal. So by refiling yet another motion, recycling the same tired old arguments makes no sense. And so Judge Merchan just basically denied it. He said, look, you've already done this and you are making these motions. Now you're saying the reason, now you're adding another reason why I should recuse myself, which is because there's a gag order. Well, P.S. I already modified that gag order. You can say whatever you want. The only thing you can't do is attack court staff families and prosecutors' families. And, that's it. You can talk about the witnesses, you can talk about the jury even, you can talk about the case, you can do whatever you need to talk about. So there's nothing happening that he's restricted from. You just can't threaten public servants who are working on your case. So that's literally the only thing the gag order does. So he pointed that out and said, also, the other argument is basically already been ruled on. And one of my favorite lines in here is he literally, the judge in his decision says, essentially, this does not merit extensive discussion since it doesn't credibly purport to support the motion for recusal. Rather, it appears to be nothing more than an attempt to air grievances against this court's ruling. I mean, it's just, that's such a Judge Merchan thing to do, to kind of say something like that, because that's all they are doing. It's just airing grievances. It's such a very, very strange thing to do. And the court also says, for the third time, innuendo and mischaracterizations do not a conflict create. Recusal is not necessary. So, that was number one that he ruled on. And he said, look, anyone who wants to do sentencing briefs, feel free to, I'm still waiting for them, any recommendations for sentencing. I'm not recusing myself. And then hot off the presses today, as we are talking about this, a letter brief comes in from Todd Blanche, the lawyer representing Donald Trump, to Judge Merchan, asking for, wait for it. What is
some more time?
Delay. That's what, right? That's what. Talk about a playbook, right? There is one playbook that Donald Trump has, and he does the same thing over and over again. And one of them is delay. So, of course, the court should adjourn any sentencing in this case, though one should not be necessary because dismissal and vacatur of the jury's verdicts are required based on presidential immunity until after the 2024 election. We respectfully submit this pre-motion letter seeking that adjournment relief. And they go on and on saying, notwithstanding the court's ruling on the disputed recusal issue, the one we just talked about, right? The ruling I just talked about, the adjournment would mitigate any conflict and appearance of impropriety, which are also the subject of an ongoing congressional inquiry. And so in yesterday's ruling, the court did not address the significance of the 2019 conversations with Your Honor's daughter criticizing President Trump's use of Twitter, with the new fact being that existing tweets from President Trump at the time are squarely at issue in the immunity motion. So what they're saying here in this letter is that because some of the evidence used at trial were tweets from the White House account, that should come out, and your daughter criticized Trump for using Twitter, and therefore you are used. It's just, talk about a stretch, It's almost like saying, I once walked down the street and saw Donald Trump, so that means we're friends. It's like, it's like such a bizarre just stretch of the facts. And so they go on and say things. It's all about the daughter again, right? The recusing because of the daughter, and because she works for this consultant firm. So I'm just looking at the letter as we're talking, but essentially they're saying they don't want the Manhattan DA's office from filing a sentencing submission while the court is considering the presidential immunity motion, because they want the judge to consider it without any influence from the DA's office, I guess. But both sides get to put in their sentencing brief. So I don't understand. Yeah, this is such a strange letter. So the adjournment is necessary to allow Trump adequate time to assess and pursue state and federal appellate options. P.S. Guess what? You get to appeal after sentence. That's when you assess your appellate options, not before. That's what happens. And the current schedule contemplates the type of, quote, highly expedited proceedings the Supreme Court already criticized. This is not expedited. They put this over already. So anyway, they say, finally, setting aside naked election interference objections, there's no valid countervailing reason for the court to keep the current sentencing date on calendar. I mean, it's just all they want is delay. They
and special treatment. They're
treatment.
treated because this is how the system works.
Every other person gets sentenced. Would have been sentenced already.
This is when you talk about the playbook. I mean, Trump's lawyers in the civil fraud case brought by the Attorney General raised the same arguments so many times that they were held in contempt. Now, whether that stands up on appeal is a question. But here, they just keep raising the same arguments. And Judge Merchan he accused them of mischaracterization and outright falsification of facts. And that's what they're doing here again, the day after, shortly after he denied the last recusal motion. It's pretty astonishing. And it really does speak to the influence, shall we say, that Trump has over his lawyers, getting them to do things that these lawyers know very well is not appropriate. But
it's so interesting because now that you say that, Danya, because we're obviously attorneys in private practice, and we have clients who ask us to say and do things all the time, and we have to explain to them we can't.
They know sometimes that for their own protection, right, and ours, right? But we are guardrails.
Why do these lawyers, Danya? Why do they represent them then, Danya? What's in it for them? Other than
I did a whole Slate interview.
I saw that
about this. I don't know. I mean, some of them think they're going to buck this trend, right? I forget who came up with the trope of MAGA standing for making attorneys get attorneys, but it's a good one, right? I mean, so many of them have been disbarred or disciplined or sanctioned or indicted, and not paid, and they keep coming back. I think, look, a couple of them have had some success, right? I mean, they got the Mar-a-Lago case dismissed for now, at least. But it's everyone thinks they're going to be the one who somehow gets, Trump acquitted or, absolved or something. There's a certain hubris to it, I think. But, there are some true believers, right? I think Susan Neckles might fall into that category of true kind of dyed-in-the-wool defense lawyers who believe everyone deserves a defense, which they do. I believe that too. I just don't believe that I have to be the one to provide it in a case where I'm ideologically or ethically, have my own concerns. But
Susan Neckles doesn't always sign her name to these letters. For example, this letter that I just read to you, that was just asking for an adjournment. This is signed by Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais, not Susan Neckles. And I've noticed that, yes, she believes everyone deserves a vigorous defense, but she doesn't sign her name to things she doesn't believe in.
Standard, right?
And you got to respect her for that.
That motion that accused the DA's office of prosecutorial misconduct, and she did not sign that one, as I seem to recall. So I agree with you. You can present a defense without, I think, imperiling not only your own reputation, but your client's best interests, which, as you pointed out, pissing the judge off who's about to sentence you is not usually seen as a great idea. But I think that ship has sailed, long since sailed.
It's unbelievable to me. So just, just really quickly, because we're really reaching the end of the show, but really quickly, what's going on in the other cases. Uh, as you mentioned, they were successful in the Mar-a-Lago case, getting it dismissed. Well, now Donald Trump is actually going to sue the Department of Justice. Did you see this? They filed notice that they're going to sue the Department of Justice because they're claiming malicious prosecution and all these things, and the search warrant was invalid, and and he's asking for like $100 million.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I was like, who used the word chutzpah before?
That's exactly.
That's the definition.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like, so they're going to sue the government, right? Saying, oh, we spent tens of millions of dollars in legal fees, and they're asking for punitive damage. What was ironic there is in the E. Jean Carroll case, they argued that the punitive damages, which was 4 times the number of actual damages, they argued that that math equation is too much. You can't do it because there are some limits on punitive damages. They do have to be somewhat related to the compensatory or actual damages. Punitive damages are meant just to punish, and compensatory damages or actual damages are meant to make the person whole again for money lost and for actual things lost. So, and there are laws and standards on what punitive damages can be. But what I thought was ironic is, so they make the argument in the E. Jean Carroll case that those punitive damages are too much because they're 4 times the amount of the compensatory. But then you look at their notice of filing the Mar-a-Lago documents, this case of that they're going to sue the Department of Justice, and they asked for like $10 million or whatever it was in actual damages for legal fees, and then $100 million in punitive damages. So on the one hand, they argue like it's just they're so not consistent, right? And that happens in a lot of their cases, right? Like on the one hand, they argued before Congress and in the removal proceeding that this was the Stormy Daniels case was purely personal, but then when it suits them, they argue that it was no, this was presidential immunity. It wasn't personal. Like they make these inconsistent arguments. Just they lie is really what it is. It's they just lie. They'll say anything to get the end that they want.
Well, as Kellyanne Conway said when she was a spokesperson shortly after he became president, I will never forget watching TV. She was being interviewed and she was confronted with some statement and some factual situation. And she said, well, we actually have alternative facts. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. There's such a thing as alternative facts. We used to, live in a world where a fact was a fact and you could argue, but a fact is a fact.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. And that's what drives me crazy about the whole MAGA thing. That's why I do this podcast, and I'm doing all of this is because, as you said, Kathleen, it's one thing to disagree on policy and to argue about, legitimate, I believe in this, you believe in that, but at least talk about facts, right? At least talk about reality and facts. And that's what drives me crazy. And that's what I love about this show is that, and this and Legal AF that I do once a week is, it's all about trying to get the truth out. That's why we don't just take our word for it. Go read it for yourself. Read Project 2025 yourself. That's why I always try to read from the actual letters themselves, or I try to read from the decisions themselves or the Constitution or whatever it is. I read it to the people who are listening and watching this because I want them to hear it don't take my word for it, right? It's there. And when I give you my opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion, but when I tell you it's a fact, you can pretty much, take that to the bank. So, and same with you guys. All right. Well, I think we've reached the end of another great episode. I love being with you guys every Thursday on MissTrial, and I love talking about these issues with you.
So, Karen, we didn't get to questions. Should we just ask?
Oh my God, I forgot.
Lightning round, or we could save it till next week.
No, you're right. Go ahead. You're absolutely right. Go ahead.
There's some great ones. Our audience is so smart and so astute. So, someone asked, under the new immunity law that the Supreme Court just made up, that's my gloss, could Joe Biden have Trump disqualified? basically install a new law or order so that Trump cannot run, and use the Supreme Court's decision to prevent Trump from ever holding office. I have a view, but I ask a question. What do you guys think?
Well, so let's just unpack it. What disqualifies someone from being president of the United States, right? So we know he's over 35 years old. We know he's a natural born citizen. We know that, so but there are a few areas where you can disqualify him. Like
being a convicted felon does not disqualify.
Correct. Being a convicted felon does not. But other disqualifications. So I guess if he's impeached and convicted, right, there's there's that clause, the impeachment judgment clause of the Constitution there's the if you are impeached and convicted, you cannot hold office, right, or presidential office, right, of a high crime or misdemeanor. That's one way that he could be disqualified. Another way is what amendment is it if you're like if you've lost your mind or if you're
25th.
the 25th. Yeah, there's the 25th Amendment. There's that.
But other than all existing.
Yes, this is all existing.
I think the question is, what could Biden do? Kind of now that he has full immunity, what can he do? Can he issue some executive order or something? Right. So outside the usual rubric that traditionally has applied, what could he do? I mean, I think under this opinion, he could deport him. He could have his DOJ actually investigate him for something and put him in jail pending Senate, or ask a judge to put him in jail, pending trial. I mean, there are things he could do with impunity and immunity. But
Biden would never do that because he's a law-abiding person. He would never. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But it does. The question does, point to this terrifying moment that we're in, where sure, he could do whatever he wanted. I mean, he could, according to this opinion, he could have SEAL Team 6 shoot him dead in the street. I guess
it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
Well, this is why character matters. Who you are matters. When you want the office of the most powerful person in the world, it matters. What your core beliefs are, and the argument.
You want someone who is not going to do something like that,
right? Well, the argument has always been about Trump that he does not really believe in anything. He believes in furthering whatever his goals are. And being someone as a Democrat who has been supported by him financially when he thought it was beneficial to him as a Republican to support a Democrat like me, he did it. And that's not to say he's the only person that does that. A lot of people do that, across political party lines. But, the danger is that, or the hope is that you have someone in that office who understands that you can't break the law. But again, with this ruling, we'll see.
So let's do one more also on immunity. There's so many questions on immunity. Why and how does a new Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity apply to a past president? So, Karen, do you want to take it?
So, I guess the question is, how can something new apply to past conduct? Right? Is that's really
retroactivity?
Yes, exactly.
Because it's a new law. Oftentimes, it's forward-looking. Yeah,
correct. That is an excellent point and an excellent question that someone brought up, because some laws are only forward-looking. And some laws you can go backwards. And, in this particular instance, this presidential immunity ruling, this is a made up judicial law. This presidential immunity, that they created, this doesn't exist in the Constitution. It doesn't exist in a statute. This is judicial activism, the very thing that they think, that they criticize, that the right wing criticizes. The MAGA will say the only place laws should come from is from the United States Constitution, or from statutes, or from case law interpreting either of those. But it shouldn't be judicial activism. It shouldn't be judges making things up. Well, in this particular instance, United States Supreme Court literally made up this ruling, made up this law, made up the standards. The language appears nowhere. It's not interpreting anything that any law that I can even point to. And so under this made up law, they have said it applies to past conduct, right? That's it. Anything that would be within the statute of limitations that somebody could prosecute, it applies to, because, you know, it's just made up.
But it also was raised in, you know, procedurally in a correct way. I mean, he was indicted for something. He always claimed that he had immunity for it. He raised it. It went up the circuit into the Supreme Court, and they ruled on it. So in that sense, that's like every matter, right? A defendant raises a trial issue and it goes up, and the conduct is always passed, right? Because that's the conduct that's been charged. If this question is going to it might be going to a slightly different question, which is, well, what about the New York case, which has already been tried? So oftentimes you have a case that's tried, a person's convicted.
And he waived it in that case.
Correct.
He didn't preserve it in that case.
Interesting wrinkle. But here, if that case had been all said and done, wrapped up, and the appeal had been perfected, and it had gone, you know, to the last possible resort, and the case was over, I think this very well would not apply to the president. But that case is still open. He's not technically been convicted in that case because the judge hasn't even imposed sentence. Appeal, you know, hasn't happened yet. So it could be backward looking in that way. So I don't think a court would have to decide on whether this new law, this made up law, as Karen keeps saying, would be applied retroactively as some Supreme Court decisions, you know, that can come up. It's a great question.
Yeah,
it is a great question,
as all of them are. So please keep them coming. We love them, and we'll reserve a little more time next time. And
yeah, thanks for reminding. I was like, okay, bye guys. I almost forgot.
Well past time, but it was worth doing.
All right. Well,
see you next week.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the Midas Touch newsletter at MidasTouch.com/newsletter.